Welcome to the Autism Now What podcast. Today, I am speaking to Ashira Zahavi from New York. She's the mother of two lovely boys, and she lives with her husband in New York. In some ways, her life stopped when her 2-year-old son was diagnosed with severe autism. After 5 years of intense dedication and multiple treatment modalities, Ashira was successful in having her son's autism diagnosis removed and his overall health restored. She has now turned her focus to supporting other families facing similar challenges. She is dedicated to ensuring others have access to the resources her family found along their way and helping parents find hope and the inner strength to stay the course. A little more on Ashira. She trained in musical theatre at the Long Island High School for the Arts and earned degrees in vocal performance from Carnegie Mellon University and the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. It's amazing, Ashira. Wow. Her desire to lead others in prayer and spirituality and to elevate communities led her on a journey of cantorial study, and she attended an academy of Jewish religion in California. She is passionate about self-expression, hers and others. Her work is devoted to empowering us to express ourselves and the voice of God within us. And today, we are going to learn so much from her about autism treatment. Welcome, Ashira.
Thank you, Alana. So happy to be here with you.
Now, my first question is, what gets you out of bed every day?
Well, my desire to share with people my experience to make their everyday lives better is one thing that gets me out of bed. My commitment to my family, to my husband, my children, and myself, to their health and happiness, and just my passion for life, like to enjoy and delight in life.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Now, tell us more about your son. He had normal development, and then at what age did you become concerned, and why did you become concerned?
Mm-hmm. Well, when he was born, he had digestive issues as a baby, and we tried different methods of feeding him until we found what worked for him. And when we introduced solids at around 6 months, he developed eczema on his skin, and we didn't know why. But when we removed dairy from his diet and replaced his bottle with a meat stock, the eczema cleared up and he started to gain weight, and he was returning to himself, and we thought that the worst of that was behind us. And then at about 15 months, he was strong, he was doing well, so we added in some more foods, and one of the things we added was cow milk. And that was our mistake, because what we didn't know at the time was that our son was not able to detoxify properly or digest that milk. And so over a period of 6 to 9 months, his behavior really changed dramatically. He had begun speaking in 2 languages, and then he stopped. He didn't speak at all, and he didn't vocalize at all. And this was my first concern. And, people said to me, oh, he's a boy, boys take longer to talk, but I knew that he was frustrated that he couldn't talk, and I thought something was wrong. So, then he began to lose interest in activities that he had enjoyed before, like instead of reading books or listening to books, he would rip them up or eat them. And it got to a point where I couldn't leave him alone with a book because I never knew when he was going to destroy it. He stopped playing with his toys. If he touched them at all, it was to throw them. He stopped being able to sit still and focus. Like if I took him to a music class, all the other kids would be sitting with their mom or their caregiver, but my son couldn't do that. He was always up running around, getting into things he shouldn't get into, distracting. Um, and I didn't know why. It was hard to take him anywhere. You know, then he started doing things to harm himself. He started banging his head against the floor or against the wall. He started eating paint and other things that aren't food, like sand or wood chips. Think playground. Um, and he would just put non-food items in his mouth, which was dangerous. Then, at its worst point, he stopped making eye contact with us, and he stopped answering to his name, which he had always done. He stopped taking simple directions, and then he started screaming, this sort of primal scream every once in a while, and we didn't know why he was doing that. It wasn't related to anything that had happened. He was just screaming. Um, and we didn't know how to stop it. It was literally like having a wild animal in our house that was spooked all the time. And it was really clear that he was unwell and needed help, but we did not know what was wrong with him. We just knew that we were losing our little boy.
Where did you turn to for help? So all of this was happening, and what emotions did you experience when you eventually, somebody actually mentioned the word autism?
Yeah, well, my story is a little unusual in this way. I had two reactions to this at two separate times. So let me explain. The first reaction I had was relief, which I know sounds weird. Um, but when my son was frustrated with his speaking, I had him evaluated by a program called Early Intervention, which is a program in the United States for children 0 to 3 who may be having developmental delays, to be evaluated and to get therapies and support to help get them back on track. And it's an important program because when you catch things at a young age, a lot can be done to help children get on track. So at my son's evaluation, I thought he was being evaluated for speech, but it turns out that he was behind in every developmental area. And in fact, he was so far behind that they weren't even going to bring in someone to do speech with him because they said he had other things to work on before they could do that. And that really puzzled me. I mean, if he's so far behind, why hasn't his doctor expressed any concern at all? I mean, he went for regular checkups. Why were they waiting to work on speech with him? So part of his therapy was music therapy. And one day during a session, his therapist was trying to teach him to sign, the more sign, like this. And she kept doing it and doing it. He was trying and he was trying and he couldn't do it. And then once he did it. And we were like, he did it! And then he couldn't do it again. And I just looked at her and I said, why is that? How is it that he can do it one time and he can't do it again? And she stopped and thought as if she wasn't sure what to say. And then she said to me, well, we think he has autism, but don't believe everything you read online. Don't freak out. There's stuff that you can do. And I said, autism? Thank God, that's something I could do something about. And of course, she thought I was nuts. But why did I think I could do something about that? You see, I was not originally introduced to autism through a person or through a friend or a child. I was introduced to autism through a book. I had already read a book by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, her book about the GAPS diet, which I'd been introduced to from another direction involving nutrition. I knew that she had used that diet to help other people with issues, and we used that diet to help my son with his digestive issues, and it worked. I knew that she had done this diet with her own son and recovered him from autism. I knew from this book that children ages 5 and under that are diagnosed with proper treatment and intervention have a very good chance of becoming as normally functioning as their peers. I knew the power of food to heal, and I knew my son was going to be one of those people. I just knew it.
I have goosebumps. Actually, I have goosebumps listening to you, honestly, because can you imagine if you hadn't read that book? if you didn't have that knowledge. And so many parents don't. And I was savoring every single word that you just said now, because it's so hopeful. You know, so many parents that I speak to on a daily basis have heard the words, your child has autism, it's the end of the road. And to hear you say, well, you'd read about it, and you'd actually read about the fact that there was something you could do about it, you know, is so hopeful, and it's so encouraging to other parents. I have so many questions to ask you and so many things that I want to say. We must please just remember to ask you for that meat stock recipe that you mentioned, because we really want to share that with parents. And I know when I spoke to you before, you were telling me all the things that you did to restore your son's health. So I think parents will be very happy if we can get that meat stock recipe from your recipe book. But now, okay, so you heard this word autism. You started him on the GAPS diet, right?
Right. Well, then, but here's the second part. So the first part was I had hope, which is, you know, I really, if I can offer that to any parent, I'm happy to, because that really was a guiding light for me on the journey. But there was another side to this, which was, yes, it is true that the food really played a huge role in reviving my son's health. But I really had no idea what autism was. And, you know, it's a deeply humbling path. Autism is no joke. My son's body was filled with toxins that he could not easily get rid of. His brain had been affected for many months by this impairment, and vital days, hours, minutes were lost, where he should have been soaking up all the information around him, and he was just literally frozen in time by this illness in his body. And so the task before us was enormous. You know, we had to first stop getting the toxins into his system. Then we had to remove the toxins so that he could think clearly to learn. And then we had to have him learn not only everything that he had lost, but everything he was losing in every minute going forward, that he was not able to function properly. I mean,
let me ask you something quickly. You talk about toxins.
Mm-hmm.
What could be toxins that are contributing to the symptoms of autism that we're seeing? What were your son's toxins contributing?
So I'm not a doctor, and I wish I was sometimes, because this is the part of the process that I feel like I can't speak clearly about. This is where I want to bring expert number one and expert number two to tell you exactly. So I you know, I don't know what the name of the toxins are, but I know that my son, you know, I know this now after, you know, seeing doctors and learning that my son's, we all have a detoxification system. And when it's functioning properly, any toxin that comes into your body, anything at all, exhaust from a car, you know, a pesticide that's on a vegetable that you eat, a cleaning product that you use to clean your bathroom, whatever it is, any toxin comes into your body, and your body can just flush it right out. Okay, that's how it's supposed to work. But when you have a compromised gut and you have a compromised digestive system, your detoxification system does not work properly. And it can detoxify some things and not others. And so, you know, people on the autism spectrum are not the only people that have a detoxification issue. There are many, many different health issues that are contributed to by this, you know, condition that so many people on the planet now have. We live in the most toxic time of humanity that has ever been, you know, and you can be doing everything right and still be getting toxins into your system. And so without his detoxification process working properly, it could have been anything. It could have been lead. In his case, he wasn't able to digest the milk. So he would drink the milk, but it wouldn't go properly into his system. It would go through the gut lining, into the bloodstream, and then into his brain. And so he wasn't able to think clearly. It was like he was in a fog all the time. What the name of those toxins are, I don't know. I'm sorry.
You answered that question so beautifully for me, because you gave us the answer. The toxins are the food we're eating, the water we're drinking, the air we're breathing, the chemicals in our environment. And I'm so glad you mentioned the dairy and the milk, and you explained it in such a simple way, because parents will say to me, but why can't he have the dairy? And you just explained it now, that he wasn't digesting it and it was actually leaking into his gut. So I think that was really very, very informative. Okay, so you started to get him onto this GAPS diet. Tell us more about the early days. So you started the nutrition, and when did you start the education part of it, the ABA?
Okay, so let's see. It's there's so much that happened right at the beginning that's so crucial that I feel like I don't want to miss any of it. With the ABA, I wasn't. He was. Let's see. He became sick around age 2. The person from EI told me he was sick around 2.3, something like that, 3 months later. And then within 4 days, I had transitioned him on to stage 1 of the GAPS diet. And the hardest thing to get rid of was the milk, because he was basically on it except for milk, and he was addicted to milk. He would drink it all the time, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, every snack, but how am I going to get this away from him? So what I did was I fermented the milk and I made it yogurt. I fermented it for 24 hours, so all of the lactose was removed. And he had this food before, but it wasn't usually in his bottle. So, he drank it. He was like, it's not sweet like regular milk. It's tangy. So he drank it, but then he got less interested. And over about 4 days, he just stopped asking for it. And then we were on stage 1 of the diet. And stage 1 of the diet is basically soup, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You can take the boiled meat and veggies out and eat them on the side if you want, but basically, for all intents and purposes, you're eating soup. Soup from different animals, different meats and vegetables to mix it up, fish broth, lamb broth, beef broth, chicken broth, whatever you can do. And so he was eating that. And every time I would give him a spoonful, I would do the more sign. And I would ask him in Hebrew, do you want more? Atate od? And he would go, and then he would eat. So we created this partnership between the two of us, where if he didn't say yes, I didn't give it to him. But at the same time, if he asked me for milk, he wasn't getting that, which he didn't, but if he had. And so we went on like this, and within 24 hours of him being exclusively on this diet, he stopped his constant screaming. He started making eye contact. He started answering to his name, and he started taking simple directions. Now, at the time, I had no idea what a miracle that was. If I had known, I think I would have been really paralyzed about moving forward on the journey.
It's a huge miracle. It's a huge miracle.
Huge. There are some people with autism who never get there with all the therapy and all the interventions that are given to them. It was humongous. But I didn't know this. I was just like, oh, okay, finally he's answering to his name. He's not screaming anymore. So we stayed on the diet, and he was calmer and more relaxed. And every time we would try to introduce a food that didn't agree with him, well, I should say, we made a list of all the symptoms that subsided after he, started. And when we would introduce a food that didn't agree with him, we would watch for symptoms. And it would be sometimes the case that we would give him a small amount, a quarter of a teaspoon of something, and 15 minutes later, we would see 7 different symptoms emerge. And we were like, oh, he's not ready for that food, so we took it out, So here we are, we're doing this for a month. The child is eating all the time, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, happy kid, more. And then one day, he stops eating. He just wants to drink water. This is every mother's nightmare. Oh my God, my child's not eating.
And a Jewish mother's nightmare. It's right. A mother's nightmare, but the Jewish mother's nightmare.
That's right, exactly.
You can't not eat.
Exactly. So, scary. But, he was drinking water. He was not in distress. He was going about his day. And he was such a good eater. I thought, okay, well, I'll respect him. Second day, no food. Okay, third day, no food. I start getting worried. And so I start researching, are there any other parents that have put their child on the GAPS diet who have had this experience? And lo and behold, I find, yes, there are. And there are some children that when they go through this process, some of the bad bacteria, the microbes that are growing, that are, that are feeding off the toxins. As the toxins come out, they have a kind of something called a die-off. Again, I'm not a scientist, but there's an active die-off. And while they're doing that, their body is just still, and it's going through a cleanse, a deep cleanse that the body knows how to do, and that we as humans, like, we have no idea. I could not make that happen. Okay, his body. And so I was like, okay, other people have been through this. If he's not in distress, we'll go with it. Okay, so day 4, no food. Day 5, no food. Day 6, no food. Day 7, no food. And he's lying on the couch very like zen, just sort of, but he was drinking water. Day 8, my son starts to eat again. And then he starts to speak. First, parts of words, and then whole words. Like he would say, instead of kitzitzot, he would say ot for meatball, or instead of dilorit for squash, he would say eat. So I would say, do you want more? And he would go, eat for dilorit. And he would tell me which kind of soup he wanted to eat. Ot, which meant meatball soup. And, in a month, my son had over 100 words in 2 languages.
My goodness.
When he was first to die,
1 month. What an incredible result from the GAPS diet. Where can parents find this GAPS diet?
Dr. Natasha wrote a book. It looks like this.
Yes.
You can get it on Amazon. I'm sure you can get it lots of places. And in this book, she outlines absolutely everything that you need to do in terms of the diet. When I started this diet, my husband was a full-time student and working to support our family. So we were on a very shoestring budget, and we did this diet. So, it's not easy, but it's possible. And there are also a team of GAPS practitioners who have been trained by Dr. Natasha to support people in their individual journey, because everybody is so individual in terms of their needs. So you can contact them. They have practitioners worldwide, actually.
Ashira, I'm so glad that you could show parents the book, and this message that you're giving everyone today is so powerful. I'm hanging on your every word.
Yeah, it was such a miracle. I mean, the speech therapists who had come, they weren't planning to teach him how to talk. They were going to use a picture system. And
Yes.
because he couldn't point, they were going to have him like pick up a card and show you like milk, bread, whatever. And from the time she evaluated him to the time she did her follow-up, he was already talking. So there was no pick system, and he just, kept going and going and going. So, so there are 2 things I want to say to people about this. One is, obviously, when I finally understood what autism was, and the expert said to me, he's not going to talk, he's not going to go to mainstream school, I made I was like, oh, he's not going to talk. That means no meaningful relationships. That means no spouse. That means no children. That means no family. Oh, he's not going to go to school. That means he's not going to have a job, which means no independence, which means no self-expression, which, from my intro, is something I really care about a lot for all people, and especially my son. And, the idea of that staring me in the face as a reality was absolutely petrifying.
Sure.
And it was just, my life stopped in that moment. I stopped breathing, I stopped thinking, and I looked over at my son, who was in his own world where nobody could reach him. And I just realized that the only thing between that being the rest of his life and him being connected to the world was me. And it was my job to help him with that. And, with the diet, there are so many things with autism that are just completely out of your control. There's nothing you can do about it. But with the diet, that was something I could do. Every single bite of that homemade soup that I made for him made him better. And the fact that I asked him and he said yes meant that we were in a partnership. And he was playing as much of a role in his healing as I was playing as his caretaker. And for me, that was so empowering. And when people, read about the diet and they find out about it, and they say, oh, it's hard, it's so different, it's not the way we live, how can you do this? I say, you know what's hard? Living with a child with severe autism, that's hard. Making a pot of soup, Not that hard. You want to deal with a tantrum? Guess what? You're going to be dealing with tantrums over absolutely everything. You think a bowl of soup is any different than that? It's really not. But once the children start getting, or the people start getting this nutrition into their systems, and they stop putting the stuff into their systems that is making them sick, the microbes start to change and the resistance starts to change and they just start eating, you know?
I love how you explain it, and I agree with you. I always say that you have to choose your hard. You can choose making a pot of soup, or you can choose having a child who's going to have autism symptoms.
That's right.
So I also find it quite extraordinary that you were able to honor his will, his wish not to eat during those 8 days when he only had water. I find it incredible. I would have been having heart palpitations. I think you had to be very brave and very strong to push through those initial 8 days and to really honor him. That's incredible. You must have been so happy when you wanted to have some soup at the end of that.
I was so happy. I was so relieved. Of course, absolutely. Well, I have to say, I don't really know where this comes from, but I am a person of deep faith, and I always have been. And of course, I believe in God, but I also believe in truth and people's truth and process. And, even though I'm his mom, this is his process. It is his body. It is his illness. And, you know, I I really needed to trust him. Not like I was ignoring him or not paying attention or not watching or not ready to step in if an intervention was necessary, but I just kept asking myself in every moment, what do I do now? And I offered him soup. I would offer him food. It was always there, and he was like, "No, thanks." I mean, it's not like I stopped feeding him, like offering him food, but that's the thing in life, but especially in this journey, is that every moment you just have to ask yourself, okay, given what my commitment is, what's my next move?
Yes,
And it changes. It's a dance.
it is. It's definitely a dance, as you say. Now, in South Africa, parents are warned against the teaching methodology applied behavior analysis, ABA. They are told that it's robotic, it's rigid, it's bad, should be avoided. What do you say to these parents?
Well, the first thing I would say to a parent who told me that's what they were told is I would ask them, who told you that? And what alternative did they offer you for helping your child? And and with that alternative, what results can they say have been produced from that alternative? Because there are lots of ways to heal in life, and I think one way is not the only way in anything. But it's also definitely not the case that there's nothing that can be done about anything, especially autism. I mean, there's so much that can be done in this area. So that would be the first thing that I would ask. And if that person doesn't have something to offer you that's credible, I would not make that person a trusted confidant or guide on this autism journey, because you have alternative options from people who have walked the path and have had real success that can help guide you if that's what you want.
Ashira, tell us how you began your son on the ABA journey.
Yes, great. So you could say, after hearing what I shared about food, oh, why would you bother with ABA? He's already talking, he's already making progress. What do you need that for? And when I found out, well, where did I find out about ABA?
Oh my goodness.
There's a chapter in this book called A Word About Education,
Oh, wow.
and you should read it. So the same woman that developed this diet is saying, yes, this diet's amazing, but it's very likely your child's going to need this too.
Yeah.
And why? It's because the child has lost, not only lost things that they're supposed to be naturally picking up, but they're losing every minute as they go forward. So there is so much that they have to learn, and they are not yet learning it naturally on their own. They need to be taught, and they need to be taught in a very specific way. And so the beginning kind of ABA, it's skill building, and it involves drilling, which I think sometimes people feel taken aback by. But if you think about it, learning to walk is drilling. You get up, you fall down, you get up, you fall down, you get up, you fall down. You're doing it over and over again. You're just doing it on your own. But children or people, with autism, they can't do that. They need someone to tell them, get up and step and fall, get up and step, get up and step, until they can do it themselves. That's part of the process of the, rehabilitation, you could call it in some ways, like just catching up. And so the part of ABA they do at the very beginning is skill building, and that is essential. But as the child learns and grows, then they move on from that to a point of learning from their natural environment. And so then you're still doing ABA, but you're doing it in a much more low-key way. It's like two people hanging out playing a game, except that I'm going to remind you of this skill, or we're going to come from this direction, or I'm going to, teach you this foundational idea, and you're going to remember it, that kind of thing, until it becomes so natural that it fades out and you don't need it at all. So when you have good quality ABA, that is the way that it works. And so I knew my son needed that. And I was, I was like, how am I going to get him something like this? 40 hours a week of one-to-one therapy with a specially trained person? Like, I can't afford that. Like, who can afford that? That's, impossible. Where do you even get that done? But, I just kept looking until I found it. And I was so blessed to live in very close distance to a CART center, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, which I think is arguably the number one place in the world for ABA therapy.
Amazing. And, it's so encouraging to hear that ABA is covered under medical insurance in America. In South Africa, we have absolutely no funding for this kind of intervention. It's absolutely unheard of. There's no government funding. There's no medical insurance. Were you able to get support with funding for the ABA?
I was. I'm so sorry to hear that about South Africa. And I will say that the reason funding is available in the United States is because ABA has been proven as an effective treatment for autism recovery in some cases. Otherwise, it wouldn't be something that's considered, medically necessary. But in the United States, if you have an autism diagnosis, then ABA is considered a medically necessary treatment, which is why it's covered by insurance. And there are details about that. Nothing is like a blank slate. This qualifies as medically necessary, this doesn't, and they argue about that. I don't know the details, but I will say that even though it's covered in 50 states in the US, the coverage varies from state to state. So it isn't the case that, everywhere you go, you will get the same coverage. Some states after the age of 6 for a child won't cover it anymore. Some states will cover 25 hours, but not 40. It depends. And also insurance companies. So in my case, we lived in a state that was probably, it was for sure one of the top states in the country for this kind of coverage. And so my son was able to receive his ABA therapy, and we didn't pay anything for it at all for 2.5 years.
Wow.
I did have to fight the insurance company, but, we did it.
Amazing. It's just incredible. It's so nice to learn about this. Now, recently your son was evaluated by Dr. Graham Pichet from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. After 4 years of intensive ABA, what was her conclusion?
Well, she had she interviewed him and had her time with him. And when he left the room, she looked at me and she said, I don't see a diagnosis. She said, whatever there is that's left to work on, it isn't autism.
What an amazing outcome. Can you even describe the emotions you were feeling when you heard these words? I mean, what went into achieving these results. So how did you feel?
Yep. I mean, I just put my head in my hands and cried, but I mean, relief, joy, elation. But I'll tell you, I think I felt so strong. I literally felt as if I had moved a mountain, and I learned that moving a mountain is not about picking it up and moving it to the side. It's about taking your shovel and every step of the way moving piece by piece, that entire structure, until one day you look up and you see, oh, that mountain was over here and now it's over there. And I did that. And I didn't do it alone. I had a team. I established a team and made myself the foundation of that team. And to be on my team, you had to be willing to agree that recovery from autism was possible, not guaranteed, but possible, and that that was our goal. And if you weren't on board with that, you were not on the team.
It only seems impossible until it's done. And I agree with you. When I had my ABA team for my youngest, who also recovered from autism, I wanted therapists who were going to go to the moon and back. And that's what it takes. So I love how you describe what you needed in a team. But what I can also gather from speaking to you is your involvement. And I think that's so important for parents to understand, that the parents have to have a certain amount of involvement in the team, in the program. Your team is going to be as strong as your involvement, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My husband and I were both feet in the whole time. We went to parent trainings. We were trained by card in how to handle our son's behaviors in a way that was most empowering. And so he had a completely consistent experience. Whatever happened at therapy happened at home, and that was it. And you just have to be in it until it's over. When in the middle of my son's treatment, my husband needed to change jobs, and the thing at the top of my list in terms of where we went to live was getting my son these services, even though he had already been in it for 2.5 years, and even though he was doing really well. A lot of parents would have just said, okay, that's good, we don't need any more. I was like, nope. And this time it cost us thousands of dollars, and we had to, we didn't have a center, so we had to scramble to hire people and whatever we had to do. But it looked different, but we just did whatever there was to do until the end.
Now, autism takes its toll on the family. How did your husband feel along this journey, and how did you and your husband manage to weather the storm and stay together?
Well, I'm really blessed to be married to an exceptional man who loves me very much and whom I love. And before autism came into our family, we we just had a very rock solid relationship, you know, and we both have a strong commitment to each other's happiness and self-expression, and we have shared values and all of that. But I had been in relationships before that I know if autism had come into my life then, those relationships would not have made it. And that would have been okay. That would have been for the better, because the person who I am on the other side of having gone through this is someone I'm really proud of. And, um, the relationship and the marriage that I have on the other side of this is something that I feel very proud of. So, I believe everyone deserves that.
Uh,
And how did we get through it? We just did it. He let me take the lead. Obviously, he had his hands full in his life. He trusted me, but we made all these decisions together. Everything that I learned how to cook, he also learned how to cook, and so I was not alone. I did most of the work, but I could always step back and he could step in. He was just there. He was a full partner.
I think it's very difficult when the parents are not on the same page. And I always say to parents, fight autism, don't fight each other. And you have to make a commitment to each other that no matter what, you're not going to allow autism to rip you apart. You have to make that commitment. And sometimes I would let my husband get his way, and sometimes he would let me get my way. And as you said, it's a partnership, but it is a very, very treacherous journey. Now, can you list the top 3 things that are essential for making the best ABA program? For those parents who have enrolled their child in an ABA program, what do you think are the 3 most essential criteria to get the best outcome?
So the first thing I would say, start with the right program and the right staff. Make sure that you have a program that you like, that's effective, where you can get along with people, because you're going to need to trust them. So you need to find something that really you're comfortable with, and then you need to learn everything that you can from them. about how to support what they're doing and how to support your child. Because it's not going to be successful if they're doing one thing over there and you're doing something else at home. You have to work with them as a team. And then the third thing I would say is get as many hours as you possibly can of that ABA therapy for your child, especially from the beginning. The first 2 years are the most critical. You know, and if I could add one more thing, I would say be patient, be reasonable with your expectations, and regularly reevaluate where you are, because it is a dynamic process. And sometimes it will feel like you're not getting anywhere, and you really are. And then, you know, other times you'll just fly and turn around and say, well, that was working 5 minutes ago, but it's not working now. Because why? Because your child got it. They generalized, they're moving on. Like, you now need a new technique, you know? So that's part of the process. So to have the most successful experience, those are the things I would say.
I agree. And there were many times when I was along our ABA journey, especially with my younger son as well, who did recover. I mean, we did hit a brick wall, but it was all about having a team meeting and devising a strategy and deciding how we were going to break that wall down. And we broke those walls down. Now, if there was only one pearl of wisdom that you could share with parents on the autism journey, what would that be?
So I'm talking to parents here, you know, not just anybody. Honestly, I would say that raising a child with autism is really hard, and it's not your fault. You did not do anything wrong to be in the situation that you're in. And it is your responsibility to care for your child. So, you know, just let yourself know that first. And then from that place, establish your commitments, you know, make the best choice you can in line with those commitments in each moment, and surround yourself with support. There is always someone there that can help you get from where you are to where you want to be. Always. And the last thing I would say is just be open to being surprised and delighted by the positive things that will come your way in this journey, because they will. You know, it isn't only hard. It's also wonderful. And the victories are so sweet. You know, I mean, my son completed kindergarten successfully with no support. And he got an award at the end of the year for being a bucket filler. He's the guy that, you know, if someone's not feeling well, he goes over and says, oh, what's wrong? Or someone needs a pencil, I can sharpen that for you. Or, you know, he's like Mr. Helper. But, you know, he's like, everybody loves him. I mean, this child couldn't go to kindergarten because he was so, like, you know, I mean, amazing, amazing victories.
This guy was going to be using pics to communicate.
That's right. Oh, God.
It's just such a wonderful achievement, and it is so encouraging that you can be speaking today to all these parents who are hearing your story and being inspired, because it's a hard journey. You know, you're in the trenches, you're trying to work, you're trying to put food on the table, you're trying to pay your bills, you've got the siblings to look after, you're not sleeping, you're physically and emotionally drained. I always say, when you are fighting the autism battle, it really does feel like you are on a battlefield, because there are these bullets flying over your head, and you have to take cover. But for Martin and my husband, Martin, and for me, you know, we had a choice. We could just lie there and succumb to our wounds, because we were wounded from the bullets that were flying over our head. Or we could crawl to the helicopter on the hill that would airlift us to safety. And we took a decision. We chose to crawl as fast as we could to the helicopter. You have a choice. Don't just lie there. You have to get up. Every day is hard. Every day is a slog. It's a roller coaster. And it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to feel stuck and to feel as if you've hit a brick wall. But you have the good days, and you will make that progress, and your child will overcome the stumbling blocks. And that's why I'm so happy that parents can be inspired by your story and can draw comfort from your courage. Now, is there any particular quote that you live your life by?
Yes, there is. It's a quote by Marianne Williamson from a book called Return to Love. And it's a quote that I heard when I was in university and has just stayed with me for a long time. Sometimes it's attributed to Nelson Mandela, but it's actually Marianne Williamson who said this. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. You were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within you. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others.
Ashira, that's beautiful. That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Ashira, when we spoke, you mentioned that you were consulting with a doctor from New York and that he'd been treating your son's autism. You told us about the GAPS diet. What were the other instrumental recommendations that this doctor made for your son that helped him onto the road to healing?
Yeah, so we met Dr. Ellis after our son had already been on his healing journey for quite a while, and was doing pretty well. But we still had some concerns. We needed the support of a doctor who just knew more about the physical aspect of kids with autism, and he was recommended to us. And so, again, I'm not a science person, so I can't actually tell you the details about every single thing that he did, but I will tell you this, that he did extensive testing on the children. He did blood work, he did his stool testing, and he looked at how their guts are doing, he looked at what's in their blood, and so he was able to identify nutritional deficiencies that my children had. He was able to tell us more details about the kind of toxins that are in their system so that we could try to figure out why they're there and how to get rid of them. He told us about something called, he helped us look at their methylation and that relationship to their detoxification, because even after all this time on the diet, they still had toxins in their systems and they still were not able to detoxify everything that was going on. So it turns out that my children have an MTHFR gene mutation, which has them not be able to digest casein. And so, he was able to pinpoint certain things for us that helped us both to understand, how my son's autism developed in a way, but also what we needed to do to treat that. Did that answer your question?
Yes. And tell me, I know that he orders so many blood tests. Were you willing to take your son for all these blood tests? Because a lot of parents will say to me, I just can't do it.
Oh, yeah. Well, it goes back to we do everything that we're asked to do. And so what we did was we went as a family. They all know us at the blood place. And it's so much blood, they could not take the blood in one sitting because the kids are too small. So one summer we went, I think, 5 times to get blood drawn, 5 different times. And my husband would be with one, I would be with the other, and we would sing to them, and we would, play games with them, and we would distract them, and they would have competitions to see who could be braver, and who wouldn't cry, and who wouldn't, and the first time, of course, they don't know what's happening. I mean, I'll never forget the first time my son had his blood drawn, and he's looking at the nurse, and everything's fine, and then she sticks this needle in his arm, and he looks at her like, how could you do that to me? Like, I trusted you. But, it doesn't really hurt once it's in there. It's just it's scary. And so, we just did it. And so, but they now know the lobotomists. I mean, they wait for us when we come, oh, where's your son? How are you? Whatever. I mean, it's ridiculous. But the blood work is so important because without the blood work, you can't know. I mean, we are feeding our children foods that contain the vitamins that they have deficiencies in, which tells us that they're still not digesting their food properly, that they still, the gut takes time to heal, a long time. So, that's how we did it. I would say, you got to be creative and be brave.
And so when you did the blood test, did you find viral infections?
Yep, we found viral infections and antibodies for things that like hadn't quite manifested but were on their way. Yes, that were able to get addressed with medication or supplementation.
And it's so interesting to hear that from you because that's all part and parcel of an autism diagnosis. Some children have viral infections, and that can also interrupt their development of language. I learned that along the way. Um,
Mm.
Also, yeast and Clostridia. Did you identify yeast and Clostridia in his gut? You did. Well, early on, you mentioned when you started the GAPS diet that by him having only the liquid diet, you were changing the microbiome. But when you did testing, did you find yeast? Did you find Clostridia in the test results?
Let me think. I'm pretty sure that yeast was found. I don't know about Clostridia. It's possible that it was.
Yeah.
But yes, there were things that were found. Also allergies. Things that he like. For example, he has sensitivity to beef that I didn't know about, and not just cow milk, but beef. So if I'm giving him beef broth, thinking that that's going to help him, but he's actually having a reaction to it, then that's not something I should be giving him. So you know, um, yeah.
What food allergy testing did you do? I know that food allergy testing can be quite controversial. It's not very easy to access food allergy testing in South Africa. Some people say you should take a blood test, other people, test on the skin. How did your doctor test for food allergy?
Well, we actually did it on me first before doing it on the boys because it's quite an involved process. I mean, they have I think 9 foods that they test for first, which are the highest allergens. I don't remember them all, but they're corn, milk, wheat, soy, peanut. There's 2 more, and so it is a skin test. So they prick you. They put like a certain amount in, like a little shot, and then they wait to see what the bump looks like, and they measure it. And based on that, they can tell what you're responding to, um, and if they need to do it again. And they'll keep like if you do react, then they keep giving you I forget if it's like certain amounts, less and less, or maybe more and more until you stop reacting. I forget how they do it, but it's like it can take a long time. I mean, it took more than 3 hours for me to just do those 9 because you have to wait 15 minutes and then go back in. Blah, blah, blah. And then they will tell you the degree of the allergy. So if it's 1 to 2, it's like hardly anything. If it's 3 to 4, it's something to watch. If it's 5 to 6, you should rotate that food. If it's 7 to 8, you should eliminate it from your diet, like that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Um, so, I mean, that is a commitment definitely for kids. I did do a blood test that I'm told is not 100% reliable. Just to find out some information about, like, for my son who's really sensitive, just to get a sense, like, is there something I shouldn't be giving him? But, you know, the thing with food allergies is that they're tricky because, you could not be allergic to something or not have a reaction to something and then develop one, or you can have one and then it can go away. So um, I wish I had better advice on the
I think you
testing there.
I think you gave us a lot of good insight into the food allergy testing. I think it's so important for parents to know that that's something they need to look into because you can be going to all this effort to do a special diet, making bone broth soup and meat soup, and actually the meat is what they're allergic to. So just looking back on your 4-year journey, what were the top 3 medical things then that worked? Diet to restore his health. It was diet.
Hmm. You mean medical things?
Yes. So
Okay. So diet, the the antibiotics to remove the viruses and you know, um, the I guess virus, yeah, whatever he had infection. He had infections and viruses, Yeah, so having those things removed was really helpful. Um, I'm trying to think medically because it all sort of comes together.
Yeah.
I mean,
Supplements, did you give him a lot of supplements?
yes, he takes a lot of supplements. He takes them without water now. He's a king.
Wow.
I don't know how he does it. Takes all those pills. Oh yes, this is very important. So the doctor put him on something called hydroxyzine, which is
Mm.
basically an antihistamine um, for his allergies, and that really helped a lot because I'm sure he has environmental allergies in addition to whatever food sensitivities, but the allergies were really keeping him from focusing and being calm in his body, and that has really helped a lot.
So my youngest son, Aaron, the doctor also put him onto hydroxyzine, and it was just a miracle to see the outcome of this. It's an antihistamine, and Aaron is also just very sensitive to environmental toxin and pollution. So I think it's so interesting for parents to hear our discussion today. The reason I'm saying this now is because in South Africa, the parents are recommended psychiatric medication. Yeah, we are talking about food allergy. We're talking about nutrition, about methylation, supporting detoxification, treating infections, virals, the gut. And parents go to doctors where they walk away with psychiatric medication. So I think this is really informative for them because I think now doctors are starting to learn about that gut-brain connection.
Yeah, that is really disheartening to hear. I mean, our son was not medicated in any way apart from an antihistamine and an antibiotic, which is something any person can take. Um, he never had any kind of um, psychiatric medication, and he healed from this. You know, the things that resolved his behaviors were not medication related at all. And you know, I would say try this route first and see what happens. I mean, it's how do I say it? It's like autism when it depends on the severity. I don't have experience with less severe autism. I have experience with like severe autism. But when something like that comes into your life, it's like a bull in a china shop. It's like everything that you knew about your life just gets smashed and you have to start over. And it isn't mainstream. It is not mainstream to not give your children sugar. It's not. I mean, my kids go to parties and the parents are just like, "What do you feed them?" Like they don't even know. They want to have food for my kids and my kids can't. It's like, "No problem. I make stuff for them. They're fine. But it's not mainstream to not eat sugar, to not eat processed foods, to not get pizza. But it's, mainstream is going in a direction that's really not healthy. We need to change our views and expectations about, what a normal approach should be. And if you haven't tried eliminating processed food from your diet or, an antihistamine for allergies, you may want to try something like that before, you know, taking it further.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I've had the same experience because my youngest son loves celery and carrots. That's his favorite snack. And I'll never forget going to the grocery store, and he was sitting in the shopping cart, and I was begging him to get a chocolate because he is completely against chocolates. And we were standing in the line to pay, and I was like, "Come on, let me buy you a chocolate." And he was like, "Mom, I told you I want a packet of celery and I want a carrot." And I was just having fun with him. And I was like, "Come on, let me buy you a chocolate." And he was like, "I told you I want celery and carrots." And when we got to the front and we were paying, the person who was checking my order through said, "What? I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but I overheard your conversation and I cannot believe that your child is refusing chocolate and wants to eat carrot and celery. I've never heard of this in my whole entire life." And it was just such a beautiful, heartwarming experience to hear your conversation. So, children get used to eating healthy snacks. I do cheat sometimes. On the weekend, we can have our cheat day now, and he can have something that's, not 100% on his diet. Every now and again, we'll have a cheat day. But now he's 9 years old. I didn't cheat when he was 2 and 3 and 5 years old, and we were still coming through the dark tunnel of autism. Now he can tolerate a little bit, but we pretty much still are baseline, and nutrition plays a very big role in my home.
Yeah, it's critical. I mean, you don't want kids to be afraid of food, and you don't want them to feel like, if they eat something that's not on their diet, they're going to die, or they can't ever participate with their friends. But at the same time, it's important for them to just understand what those foods do in their bodies and to pay attention to how it feels and to eventually make their own good choices, you know? Um, I mean, my kids will just say, "Does that have sugar in it?" If it has sugar in it, they're like, "No, thanks."
I love that. Now, what is your message to parents who have just received a diagnosis of autism?
So, receiving a diagnosis of autism is the beginning of a journey, you know, and it's actually not even a beginning. It's a continuation of a journey that you've already been on, because a child's autism doesn't begin with a diagnosis. You've been living with autism before that. You just didn't have a name for it. And I would say, I don't know, it's hard to say. It's like I both want to say I'm sorry that's on your plate, and at the same time, we all have challenges in life, and this is just one of what it's going to be for you. But there's really, really reason to hope that that something good can come from this. Many good things can come from this, and I would invite you to take the journey of healing, whatever that looks like for you and for your family. That'll be a fulfilling one.
That's beautiful. And in conclusion, then, is autism a lifelong disability?
I'm sure it is for some people, but it isn't for everybody. You know, especially if you catch it early. If a child is diagnosed, age 5 and under, there's really a lot that you can do. Recovery is, I don't know if you can use that word, but losing your diagnosis, however you want to say it, is not a guarantee for any person. There's a saying, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And, that's true for people with autism, and that's true for people. But, every person's biochemistry is different. What had that person become autistic, what their body needs to detoxify, what viruses might be in there that are hurting them, that varies from person to person. There are some consistencies, but it's not going to be the same for everyone. And it takes a certain kind of persistence and dedication, but it is possible to recover. And even if you're not going to recover, you can improve. I remember Dr. Natasha saying, adults on the spectrum who are so disabled, let's say that they need a care for everything. They go on the GAPS diet, and then they stop being in pain. Like, their digestive system doesn't hurt them all the time, and they can be toilet trained, so that they can be independent in that way. Like, if you want to take it from the most extreme, but that in that person's life, that's huge, to not be in pain all the time and to be able to go to the bathroom by yourself as an adult. Like, so there are degrees and variations for all of these things. But I would say get out there and learn. Get out there and learn.
Ashira, it's been such a treat speaking to you today. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom, for sharing your experience and your journey. I think parents listening and professionals listening today are going to walk away hopeful and inspired by your story.